Hey everyone, I think we're live. Rock and roll. Hey everybody, welcome to DevRunner. My name is Paul. I am an endurance runner and an RRCA certified running coach, and I'm happy today to be presenting a live stream with the amazing host of the Run Sensible channel on YouTube, the one and only Neil Rooney. We are going to be talking today about every aspect we can think of regarding planning a training cycle in the most healthy way possible. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of different lengths, whether you're planning to run a 5K, 10K, half marathon, a marathon, or even beyond. We are going to try to cover all of our bases and talk about everything that will allow you to contemplate and take on a training plan, knowing that you're doing it the best way possible, the healthiest way possible. Before we get into it, I just want to cover some bases here. For anybody who's watching us in real time, I encourage you to join us in the chat. If you've got any questions or comments or just want to say hi, we're more than happy to have you. And if you're watching this after the fact, please just drop a question or comment below, and we'll be happy to get back to you after we're done here. So with that said, folks, I want to introduce Neil to everyone, and I want to give him the opportunity to say hello, talk a little bit about himself so that everybody knows a little bit more about him and his absolutely wonderful YouTube channel. Neil, take it away.
So, hello everybody, and thanks for having me on, Paul, and thanks for the lovely intro. It's always nice to hear nice things being said about you, so thank you very much for that. And I think probably the most poignant thing you said in the lead in there is the word healthy. So it's very easy to start on this training cycle and to have all these goals, and people coming into the new year now, people are going to start planning goals and looking for big aspirations for 2023. But the main thing is to make sure that you get healthy and stay healthy. There's no point in doing these endurance activities if your health if it's going to come to the detriment of your health. So I think that's kind of first and foremost what people must think about when they are training something and when they are planning their goals and thinking about what they're going to do in the year ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. A great point and a great foundation for us to build this entire conversation on, Neil. So that, just to really nail that point, I just want to make sure everybody understands that, especially for runners, endurance runners, we tend to push ourselves. We tend to be very A-type personalities where we always want to be getting better. We always want to be active. But it's very important before you head into a training cycle or pursue a goal to make sure you are healthy, make sure you're injury-free. If you've got, a little niggle or some kind of, even minor thing going on, you want to make sure that you are over that first. Do the preventative care, do the rehab care that you have to do in order to put yourself in a healthy state to move forward. Before we move on, I'm just going to show a few comments. I'm very happy that we've got people joining us this early into the live stream. Hey, Michael. It's nice to see you here. Everybody who doesn't know about Michael Sanderson's channel, go check him out as well. Just awesome runner. I'm just going to come back to this one. This is Ryan from Runner's Corner. He is actually one of my coaching clients and a wonderful runner in his own right and a wonderful host here on YouTube as well. We've also got Jess has joined us. Hi from Texas. Just got my 21 miler done and feeling great. Getting ready for Houston. Wow, Houston's a big race. Good for you. Good for you, Jess. I can't wait to hear more about this. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Neil.
I said I'm envious of that 21-mile run there. That's very, very nice.
I know you're building up yourself, Neil. So yeah. Cool. And we've also got Richard Runs Trails with us, listening to global rock stars in running. I appreciate that.
Rich.
What else? And he goes on to say, hi, just okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, everybody talk amongst yourselves as well in the chat. And if you've got any questions, again, please just drop them. So Neil, I'm hoping you can just talk a little bit about what you would consider sort of a good place to be physically, mentally, and otherwise before you decide to start pursuing a running goal.
Okay. So really the first thing is you want to have a goal that is fairly achievable. So if you think you can go for it, then go for it. And if you think it's out of your reach, then perhaps it is out of your reach. You should maybe go for something a bit shorter, a bit easier, a bit more achievable first. That'd be the first thing. And that's it's easy to gloss over that because that's just kind of a common sense thing, really. And the second thing would be I suppose it's like one of those classic answers. It depends on what you're doing, you know. I'm just about to embark on trying to break the 3-hour marathon. So for me, in order to do that, in order to run a 3-hour marathon, like, you know, you've got to be able to do a certain amount of things before you start your training. You know, there's no point in saying a couple of months ago I would have liked to try that, but I just knew I wasn't in a place where I could do that because I didn't have the aerobic base, I didn't have the foundation, I didn't have the strength, I didn't my joint. Like, it's easy when we talk about running because all we ever think about is muscular endurance and cardiovascular endurance, but we have other tissues in our body too. We have a gastrointestinal system, we have our connective tissue, which is our ligaments, tendons, joint capsules, meniscus around joints, stuff like that. So it's very easy sometimes, and I come on here and I watch loads of different channels. I hear people giving advice all the time, and sometimes it's really solid advice, but it's a small little segment of advice. There's so much other stuff that people kind of gloss over, you know.
Exactly.
And you know, learning as you go along, you know, that's probably the most important thing. Is, you know, like, you'll always be learning. I've run 21 marathons, and my last marathon was just there in October, and I certainly learned lots of lessons on that day in that marathon. And it was half an hour slower than what I would usually do, you know. But I hadn't run a marathon all through COVID, and the year before COVID I had taken a year out, so I missed 3 years of marathon running because of that. So when I came back, I knew I wasn't in shape to even go near getting a PB, but I still learned stuff on that day. So as you go through your training cycle, keep your eyes open. You know, I saw a great thing by Steve Magnus, who's a fantastic coach, and he said something recently, is that get your goal, so find your big goal, and then almost forget about it, and then just work week to week on whatever it is you're doing in between. If you have a look what your coach is telling you week on week, month on month, and focus on that, and almost forget about the big goal, because you can sometimes get lost in your training and you stop learning because you just focus on this one end goal. But it is a journey as opposed to just a destination, you know.
Exactly. You said something very early on in your answer for me. When you were mentioning setting your goals, making sure that they are measurable. I think you touched on something. I just want to kind of spell this out for everybody, because I think this is the first big important piece of advice for our conversation today. And that is making sure that you set a goal. Don't just sort of meander into running and say, yeah, I'm going to do it. Yeah, I'm going to try to up my mileage, and just kind of do it in a very amorphous way, because that tends to leave you unmotivated on a daily basis. It leaves you without a specific goal. So what I always recommend to my clients is that we choose a SMART goal. And what I mean by a SMART goal is 5 particular things. Every letter in the word SMART stands for something else. Specifically, and I'm going to look away to make sure I get it right here, you want a goal that is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and most important, in my opinion, timely. Because you should have a date. You should be able to put a date on a calendar that something is going to happen on that date, whether you're going to run your own 5K or you're going to sign yourself up for a 100-mile ultra marathon or anywhere in between. But set a date. Make sure that your time goals for that particular race is realistic for you. As you said, Neil, you made such a wonderful point in saying make sure it's realistic for you. If you want to shoot for something that you think is just slightly over the horizon, something that's a little bit beyond your reach, I always encourage my runners to go for it. Yeah. Not in an unrealistic way where, you know, like, I'm a 4-hour marathoner, you know, and I want to run a 2:45 next time I go out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Of course, that's silliness, you know. But if you can say to yourself, I ran a 4-hour marathon 6 months ago, I want to try to run a 3:45 or a 3:40. I'm there with you. I'm encouraging you, and we can build a plan.
It's important to say as well, and there is that if somebody, I always tell people this, if they have done something, let's say a 4-hour marathon before, and, you know, doing a 4-hour marathon, you might be running 3 or 4 times a week. That would probably get you a 3 or 4-hour marathon. But if your goal is going to jump quite a bit, then not only do you have to ask yourself, is that achievable, but can you do it? I mean, if you want to run a 3-hour marathon, you've got to be doing 5 or 6 days a week.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you got to say to yourself, are you willing to do that to start with, you know? And can you manage that? Because if you can't, then you're going to get injured or you're going to get sick. This is one of the two things. So I tell people all the time, if they don't manage their stress around life and running, then one of 2 things will happen. You'll get injured or you'll get sick. It's, you know, and it happens time and time again.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. For me, I always watch runners around the 6 to 8 week mark after they have begun a training plan, because if they're not well prepared, if they just go into that training plan just hoping for the best,
Yeah.
or overextending themselves, as you said, it's usually 6 to 8 weeks that injury is there, or a big sickness will come on because you're pushing your system so hard that it just starts to break down in other ways.
But it's actually very interesting that you say 6 to 8 weeks. Because like I said, you have to start, there's like different tissues in the body. So really our bodies are made up of 4 different types of tissues. So we've got nervous tissue, muscular tissue, connective tissue, and then epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue is all our coverings and linings. So that's basically your, for us runners, we're thinking really our gastrointestinal system. So that turns over in about 7 days. So anytime I do a hard race, I usually give myself a good week off, because your gastrointestinal system, you're throwing gels in, waters, fizzy drinks, the whole lot. It's taking a hit. I've been sloshing up and down. You might feel 2 days after marathon, you feel great. I see people going, I'm going to go out and do a hard 10K. I feel grand. I was like, well, your muscles might feel fine. But your gastrointestinal system, there are other systems in there, your nervous system, your immune system, So I always give myself a week. Sorry, the other tissue that I was talking about. So the muscular tissue will repair pretty well. It's got a very, very high blood supply. So that will kind of, give it a week or 2 and it's going to be fine. But our connective tissues, it takes about 6 or 8 weeks for them to really start to develop strength at the rate that it would take muscles about a week or 2. So you could get a week, 1 or 2, or even 3 weeks into training, your muscle tissue start feeling really strong. You start to feel yourself getting a little bit faster and able to run a little bit longer. With your joints, your ligaments, your tendons, your joint capsules, they're all lagging behind. So if you start pushing it in that 3 to 6 weeks, a little bit too much, that's a lot of reasons in clinic, because I work as a physio and osteopath. So I treat runners quite a lot. And that's something that I see very often, is, like you said, around that 6 to 8 week window, that people coming in with aches and pains. Yeah,
exactly. Let me say hi to Susie from I Run Things, a wonderful YouTube host, and also I'm very proud to say another one of my clients. She is working her way towards her first BQ next fall. Fantastic. And we're trying to get her there through some very smart goals along the way, so that she can build to it. Neil, you make so many wonderful points in what you just said. You described not only the importance of taking it easy as you're building up into your training cycle, but also that is why I'm blanking here. That is why the taper before a marathon or before any big race is so important, to give those joints, those ligaments, the muscles, your cardiovascular system, everything, just give it a little bit of a rest so that you can hit it hard on race day. One other thing I do want to say before we move on to other very important subjects is that if you set yourself a SMART goal, you make sure that you have a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely goal for yourself, and you go and you book yourself a race just to give yourself a point in time that you're working towards. If you realize that your goal is really, really, really big and very far over the horizon, that doesn't mean give up on that goal, or that dream. No. I think what it means is that if it's going to take you more than 4 months to achieve your SMART goal, at that point, rather than going ahead and saying, okay, well, I want one big training cycle that's going to last me 9 months and it's going to get me there, don't approach it that way. You want this stuff to be achievable in a short amount of time. If it takes you more than 3 or 4 months to get to your goal, break it down. Set a smaller goal that will get you to that bigger goal, and break it all down. With that said, I think it's also important, before you head into a training cycle, I'm very careful when I work with clients. I will not take on a client unless I know that before we start a proper training cycle, they are doing core training and that they are doing strength training. I don't even want to go into the importance of those 2 subjects, Neil. I'm just going to sit back and let the absolute expert at these subject matters just have at it. So go to it, and I'm just going to sit and listen and nod.
Okay, so these are 2 very, very important aspects, yes. And I was reading a research paper a couple of months ago, and it said, and it's very true, if you're training, they say, about 6 hours a week for any sport, so this will go for running, cycling, swimming, rock climbing, dancing, whatever. If you're doing more than 6 hours a week and you're not doing some strength and conditioning, you're not going to maximize your potential. So if you're doing 7 hours running a week, you'd be better off doing 6 and doing an hour of strength and conditioning. You'll get better from your running than doing that 7th hour of running. Does that make sense? Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, how do I approach this? So people come to me, one of the things I get in clinic all the time is people come into me and say, I've got a sciatica, I've got glute pain when I'm running, when I run uphill, my knee hurts, I get low back pain after my run, or 3K into my run, my back starts to hurt or my knee starts to hurt. And weakness doesn't cause pain. So people come into me all the time to say, I went to see such and such a physio and they said, I'm getting pain because I have weak glutes or my core is not firing. That's one that really bugs me. Mm-hmm. Weakness doesn't cause pain, because if it did, then all the people who are weak would be in pain and all the people who are strong would not have pain. But strong people get pain too. Okay, so we're not doing it to try and alleviate pain. The reason why strength and conditioning is so important is that it will maintain much more of a balance in your strength throughout your body. So if you're running all the time, you're going to be using, if you're running downhill, you're going to be using lots of quads. Certainly running is going to be massive glute workout, hamstrings, calf muscles are going to get a massive workout. Core, or I call it the abdominal wall, and the core. So the abdominal wall gets a pretty good workout, but your upper body doesn't get a huge amount of workout. But your upper body strength is very important, particularly in the.
Oh, looks like we lost Neil. Hopefully he will join us again very soon. In the meanwhile, I do want to sort of pick up where I think Neil was going, folks. Hopefully I am still live. Can somebody tell me in the chat if I am still live, or if maybe Neil is live and I'm not? It looks to me like I am live. Here's Neil. Good. We didn't lose him for long.
I think, I don't know why that dropped out. Yes, I was saying.
Yeah, you dropped for a second. I was just about to take over that conversation, but you're back soon enough to keep on moving.
So upper body strength is going to be really important in the latter stages of a race. And then the other, so that's kind of why we do a general strength and conditioning workout for all our upper body, but also your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, your calves, they're going to work much better. You're going to get much better performance out of your body if you have a global strength throughout those, as opposed to just running in that kind of linear fashion. Do you get me? Sometimes we do, to give you an example, so obviously I run almost every day, so I almost never get leg pain. But if I run on a trail where the trail is a little bit undulating and I'm kind of jumping up the cliffs and come back down, the next day my ankles are killing me, my knees are sore, my glutes are really sore. And that's because when I'm running on the road, it's just all linear. I'm using almost like the same muscle fibers all the time. But when I jump up and I'm running and I'm dipping and diving and I'm going under branches on a trail, I'm using much more global ask of those tissues. And that's why you feel sore. So the strength and conditioning is going to help you keep the strength in all those tissues, as opposed to just the linear tissues that you're using when you're doing your road running or track running. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Neil, like that's the importance of being strong everywhere. And we're not talking about muscle bound rippling with muscles. You don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, but the important thing is if you are resilient everywhere, from, your neck to your shoulders, etc., on down through your toes, that allows you to not only hold good form later in a race, especially when you're talking about half marathon and upwards, when going into the race, the entire back half of that race is going to be painful. You're going to be wishing you weren't there. And if you don't have a strong core, you start to bend forward. You start to put extra stress on your glutes, on your IT band, on all these different connective tissues. The entire kinetic chain is suddenly stressed in ways that it hadn't been previously. And what you end up with is an injury or the inability to continue moving fast. So if you've got that strong core, you're golden. So that's why I think it's so important to strength train and to do specific core training before you even head into a training cycle.
And just Neil, while we're on it, what you're saying is, when somebody gets starting to start to lean forward, it's obviously posture is changing. So again, it's another key thing that comes up in clinic with me quite a lot. Anecdotally, people coming in and they say, I think it's my posture. And really, posture is a dynamic thing. And it really is just a collection of, it's your best ability to allow yourself to move and to breathe. That's what your posture is. So whatever is the best way that your body can get you to move and to breathe. That is your posture. So if you get tired and fatigued in the race and everything starts closing in itself, that's your posture changing. That's your body saying, we need to keep moving, we need to keep breathing. This is how we can do it. If you've got weakness through those muscles, you're all going to start to cave in. If you're big and strong, you'll be able to stand up and maintain your good running gait. So 100%. And like I said, if you're doing, science would say, if you're doing less than 6 hours training a week, the amount of strength and conditioning you need, you're probably going to get that from those 5 hours running. But if you're going over 6 hours and you're not doing strength training, then you're not going to maximize your potential.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The only addendum I would add to that is if you're only running 5 or 6 hours a week and you think that's an excuse not to do core training or strength training, I would say don't use that as an excuse, because you're eventually going to become a more enthusiastic runner. You're going to want to run more and run further. So the best way to be ready for that is to just get on the ball with that core and that strength work now, because you really don't want to first start that for the first time when you start a run training cycle, because it's just, it tends to be very overwhelming. It's too much at once, and you find yourself not doing anything with as much focus as it deserves to have. So by the time you start your day one of your run training cycle for any distance, I would like to see a runner who's capable of doing core work 4 to 5 days a week and strength training ideally twice a week. I think if you're doing strength work in between training cycles, run training cycles, it's ideal to do it 3 times a week. But once you start running and you have all those extra physical demands on your body, cut it back to 2. I know from firsthand experience, I had to do that. I was doing my best to maintain heavy lifting 3 times a week when I was going through my last half marathon training cycle, and I just couldn't do it. I literally had to bring the weights down and lower the number of days down to 2 just to be able to maintain the type of speed that I expected out of myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key thing. You got to be able to manage your load, whether that is the actual load that you're lifting or the load that you have in your weekly cycle of running and strength and conditioning. And if it feels like it's getting too much, it's probably because it is a little bit too much and you might need a down week. But yeah, absolutely what you said is true. Yeah, and I didn't mean if you're doing less than 6 hours, you need to do strength and conditioning. As we say, you can't go wrong getting strong. So, it's always good if you're doing, I would tell anybody who's running 3 days a week, even if it's only 5K, 3 days a week, I would say absolutely you should do some strength and conditioning work for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're one of those people who's wondering why you're not getting faster, if you've plateaued, strength work is going to get you there. I'm not blowing smoke. I promise. By the time you get 2 or 3 months into a 2 or 3 time a week strength routine, you're going to get faster. You're just going to get faster. What makes you faster when you're running all the time, when you start running more miles, the reason you're getting faster is because you're building your muscles through the exercise of running. And, it's the same thing. If you can supplement that with strength training, then rock and roll. Before we move on to talking about the training cycle itself, Neil, I just want to, I don't know if either one of us is really qualified enough to answer this question of Michael Sanderson, but I want to at least publish this for everyone to see in case there's somebody either in the chat or who sees this after the fact that might be able to respond to Michael after the fact. So vitamin D is a good thing, but in the wintertime, of course, it's going to be harder to get that vitamin D fix, with the less sunshine and more layers on top of your skin. But
So on that one, I mean, taking some vitamin D, particularly if you're in an area where, like, I live in Ireland, so I'm in, like, from October from October to March, like, you're not getting any vitamin D if you're outside. It's just, we're too far north. It's cloudy most days. So taking some vitamin D might be beneficial to somebody. But here's the overall thing, because I think the question was, should I take the vitamin D to improve my immune system? And the answer is you can, but there's something you can do way, way, way before that. And it's much better than anything you can do. Okay. And this thing you can do, you do it every day, but it's much better than in terms of recovery. So let's just not talk about he's saying for the immune system. This will be a recovery for your immune system, for your muscular system, for your connective tissue, so all your joints, everything. The number one thing you need to do is to get the 7.5 to 8 hours sleep every day.
Oh, thank you.
If you're not getting 7.5 to 8 hours sleep, you can foam roll all day, you can massage gun, you can dry needling, you can do what you can get, wear the Normatec boots, you can do whatever you want. It's going to mean it's a drop in the ocean. If you're not getting your sleep, your recovery is not going to be what it should be.
Absolutely testify, sir. I mean, that I've learned that, firsthand, very much so in the last year, during my last marathon cycle and during my last half marathon cycle in the last calendar year.
Yeah.
That I just can't believe it. It was one of those things that started trending amongst YouTube running coaches, where that became sort of like the trendy thing to talk about, sleep. And it's one of those things where, thank goodness that trend did come to light, because it is so true. Nothing repairs you. Nothing gets you ready to perform at your best better than sleep. 100%. Your nutrition, of course, is important.
Oh yeah. So that would be
and the cross training, of course, is important. But I promise you, everybody who's listening to this, nothing does the job as well as sleep. So you're just going to have to start reprioritizing your day. I always tell my runners that if they have a caffeine addiction, they want to start rolling it back a little bit. For those, yeah, me too. For those people who like caffeine, but they think they only take in a controllable amount. The first thing I tell my runners is try to keep it, cut it off at noon, because that will hopefully, the half-life of caffeine it stays in your system a long time. So it's a good idea if you want to get some good solid sleep at night. Even if you're the type of person who drinks a lot of caffeine and you're still managing to get a good amount of sleep every night, I still recommend that people cut back and do it earlier in the day, because the thing about sleep and caffeine, the relationship there, is even if you're getting the sleep, caffeine has a tendency to keep you out of REM sleep, which is where all the heavy duty reparations to your body take place. You'll float around in lighter cycles, and you don't get as good as solid rest as you would when that caffeine is sort of like already passed through your system. So with that said, is there anything on that subject that you'd like to add, Neil?
No, I mean, so the question was, should take vitamin D? I would say, yeah, if you think you need vitamin D, you think it'll be beneficial, 100%. Vitamin C, 100%. If you think taking a protein powder, if you think taking whatever it is you want to do, I would say, if you think it's going to benefit, you do it. But if you're not getting the 7.5 hours sleep, 7.5 to 8 hours sleep, you can pretty much say whatever other ancillary stuff you're doing is marginal, almost pointless. If you're not getting sleep, and with the sleep, you throw in fairly good nutrition and obviously hydration as well. They're the three tenets. When we don't talk about running, we should be talking about sleep, nutrition, and hydration. So that will kind of cover the coffee side of it as well. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, I'm all for taking. I've taken all sorts of supplements over the years. I don't take any supplements now. I haven't taken supplements for a long, long time. I drink a green smoothie every now and again. But no, I don't take any supplements at the moment. But I certainly will come into once I start doing the heavy lifting in the marathon training in the new year. Definitely, I will. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great to hear that. So just let's talk. As far as I know, neither one of us is a nutritionist or a dietitian. But as a coach, I do know a little bit about, generally speaking, the ways you want to eat when you're running. But Neil, I just want to give you an opportunity to start us down this road. For yourself, like when you're going into a heavy marathon training cycle, how does your diet change to make sure that your body can handle the stresses of that heavy work? Okay,
so I do have a nutrition qualification. It's a small qualification I did many moons ago, but I have studied nutrition. It's like a diploma course. I did it at night time, long time ago. But I do have a basic, and then I've had a kind of fascination with nutrition for a long time. So basically, how would mine to keep it? I mean, it's such a broad field. We could talk about this for 4 hours. But for me, it would be kind of the simplest things. I would try and reduce my sugars, so sugar intake. And when I say that, just kind of my sweets, let's say.
Yeah.
I certainly bring up my carbohydrate intake and try and reduce my fat intake a little bit, and probably reduce my protein intake a little bit as well. I would pretty much work around the 80% carbs. And this is really not strict at all, but it would probably end up being about 80% carbs, 10% fat, 10% protein. I don't over protein it because my sport, I'm an endurance runner. I don't need the protein to be for anabolic buildup for muscle gain. I will get kind of, as I go through my running cycle, I will get what we call ripped, or I will get a little bit leaner. But that's just because of mileage and nutrition. So really, I would say for anybody starting out is literally just try and tidy up your diet a bit, reduce the cookies, donuts, croissants, whatever other nice things you like to eat. You don't have to cut them out altogether, but certainly reduce them and bring up your fruit and vegetables and complex carbohydrates when you're eating dinner, whatever like that, vegetables. And yeah, they would kind of be the simplest things I would tell people to do. I wouldn't. I've got some friends who've done this, and I've read a couple of people who saying that the high protein, low carbohydrate diet is really good, and it is good for muscle gain, and you will notice it in short term. You'll get really good short-term benefits out of your training when you're doing it. But if you're running a marathon, you need to be relying primarily on your body to be burning fat and glycogen, muscle glycogen and liver glycogen.
Absolutely.
And if you're living your life on a high fat, low carb diet, you just won't be able to metabolize the glycogen as quick as you should be. So when you go to do a marathon, you might get really good benefits. You might even get a quick race in a 5K or even a 10K. But once you go above 10K, there's no way you're going to be anywhere near your peak if you have been on a high fat, low carb diet. It's just science will just say it can't be done. You can get good performances, absolutely no doubt. You will lose weight, absolutely no doubt. But I don't think anybody who's going to be doing that is going to get anywhere near the times that they could get if they were doing the same training on a high carbohydrate diet.
Absolutely. It's funny, Neil, because what I've always found is that if you want to be like a heavy protein type of diet person, like you said, if you're talking about shorter, faster races, 5K, 10K, or the mile, or the really short stuff, you're going to get away with that. If you're running the super long ultra stuff, you may also get away with a more protein heavy diet because it's more of a slow burn when you're not pushing speed, but you're just trying to last for 12 hours through like a 50 miler. You can burn fat and allow that to keep your body going. But as soon as you get into sort of like the 10-mile, half marathon road races, where speed is an important factor, where you have to burn that glycogen fast and hard, you have to have a constant intake of carbohydrate that can be easily converted into glycogen, because as you said before, it's your muscles and your liver store your glycogen. And if that's not topped up when you're going into either a long run or especially a race, you're going to hit that wall. That's what the wall is. It's you reach a point where your muscles and your liver are empty of glycogen. You've got nothing. You've got no high performance fuel left in your system. Your body will switch over and try to start burning fat. But fat as a fuel source does not burn fast enough to allow you to keep up the kind of speeds that you went into your race expecting to be able to run. So that's why you usually see somebody right around that 18-20 mile mark. If they're not pumped up from 3 or 4 days of carb loading, then it's over, and there's nothing you can do to save yourself. It's not a matter of
there's a very significant and important reason as to why a lot of that stuff happens, and it is true. And it's so the glycogen that's stored in our muscles can use that, okay? And you got about 90 minutes, around about 90 minutes to 2 hour store. So that's why you get around that 18 miles, you're going to be up around there in the 2 hours, yeah? Most people, whether they're running, between say a 4 and a 3 to 3.5 hours, they're going to be around that 18 miles by the 2 hours. And it's our glycogen that's stored in our liver. Okay, so our liver is breaking. So this is why we take our gels. Our liver is breaking down the simple carbohydrates and turn it into glycogen in our blood. So that goes into the blood, and the brain can't use fats because the fats can't cross the blood-brain barrier. So only glycogen can be used by your nervous system, by your brain and your spinal cord. Okay, so as you get to the latter stage of a race, this is why we need to take gels. If you stop taking the gels, or if your nutrition has been off, your brain is going to start to go a bit wonky. Try and do some maths, try and work out paces later on. I can't do maths when I'm running. Like I just can't work out the paces. When I get around 20 miles, I'm looking at my watch going, how long is it going to take me to finish? If I'm on a training run, I could give you to the seconds, but when I'm in a race, and this is why, and these studies have been done, if you reduce the amount of glycogen going into somebody's brain, their muscle contraction goes down. So they can't contract the muscles as hard. It's nothing got to do with strength conditioning. It's nothing got to do with how much training they've done. If you just take the glycogen away from the glycogen source to the brain down, muscle contraction goes down. So therefore, posture then, like we spoke about earlier, your posture is your body's best ability to organize yourself, to move and to breathe. So everything starts to come down, and you just can't perform like you do. So 100%, the carbohydrates will be very, very important. And the carbohydrates, when you're doing your long runs, is very important. To get to train the body to be getting those gels in, and to almost get the liver to be able to produce enough glycogen to put into the blood to keep the brain going.
Absolutely. Now, before we walk away from sort of like the in-race fueling thing with whether it is liquid, everything from Gatorade to Tailwind to UCAN and all of the gels, the plethora of gels that are available to runners at this point. The only other point I want to make, when not just for racing, of course, but for when you're training, when you're out there doing your middle long runs and your long runs, it's good to get into the habit of fueling early. Don't wait till you are feeling low in energy to start getting on that gel and drink bandwagon, because at that point it's too late. Your body cannot process what you're putting in fast enough to get you back to where you would like to be. Start fueling before the race even begins. Hit a gel.
I take a gel before the marathon starts. I literally take a gel right as we're about to go.
Exactly. And the recommendations that you see on a lot of different brands gels are correct. You want to be fueling I like to fuel with a gel every 4 miles. Even if I'm feeling on top of the world, I just want to make sure that my glycogen availability is always topped up as much as it can be, because you're always going to hit a wall. Even if it's not physical where you run out of glycogen, you're still going to hit that pain cave somewhere later down the line, even in your long runs, not even just in the races. So it's always good to just get ahead of the curve and just try to stay ahead of the curve as best as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
With that said, sir, I just kind of, like you said, we could stay on the nutrition thing we could do a series on just that. But you touched on something that I think is of equal importance. And that is, like, when it comes to your muscles misfiring, when it comes to that foggy head, that also comes from your electrolytes getting too low. If you're not putting in enough salts, and if you're not putting in enough potassium and all of the other vitamins and minerals that support your muscles firing when they should, it's another way to guarantee you're going to hit that wall, you're going to start cramping, things are going to go south fast and all at once. So again, you want to stay ahead of that. So Neil, I just want to again defer to your expertise on just talking about that whole side of things.
Look, again, I live in Ireland, so our temperature is fairly mild. We don't get any extreme weather. I mean, it's frosty here at the moment, but it's been frosty for about a week, but that's very strange. And in the summer, we get it's usually 22, 23 degrees Celsius. I think that's around 70 or 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So not that hot. So, and I'm also an athlete. I don't really sweat that much. So I could do a park run and I have like a tiny little bit of a bead of sweat here. I might have a tiny bit of sweat on my brow. I'm not a sweater. I ran the park run this morning and I was talking with my buddies, and you think he just got out of a swimming pool. He's like dripping, and I'm totally dry. So for me, I don't sweat a lot. So for me, I always have salty snacks the night before a race. So I'll have a couple of pretzels, or I'll have a bag of popcorn and just plenty of water with it. That guarantees that my salt levels are covered. And then the morning of the race, before I head out, I usually have some porridge and usually 2 bananas. So that's kind of hitting your potassium. So it's usually the sodium and potassium are the 2 major minerals that you need to think about in terms of cramping. So I've been doing that I've been running for over 20 years, and I've only cramped up in one race, one Ironman race, but in one marathon I cramped up, and that was a psychological thing. That's a really interesting story for another day.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, please.
So for me, I suppose to answer your question, it's all relative to you. If somebody's a very heavy sweater, then I would definitely be getting my liquids in during the race, but also the salt tablets, because what happens more often than not is people get hyponatremia. They're getting cramps because they got too much water, so that their sodium level is dropping because they're drinking so much. So you need to get the salt tablets in. The other person, then the guy like me who doesn't sweat a lot and they're taking the salt tablets, they're gonna be dehydrating because they're getting too much salt, and now they're drawing all the water out of their interstitial fluid on their cells to buffer this sodium intake. So if I don't think this is hugely important to the mid-packer runner like myself. Well, anyway, if you're really going for it, I think the best way to get the best advice in this is to get a salt test. So, they're fairly cheap to get done. It's a sweat test. So you basically sweat, and they measure your sweat, and they say you need to take in X amount of salt over whatever distance you're doing. I think it's bad advice if you're just throwing in anything because everybody else is doing it. During the summer, I was doing long runs with my club mates. They're at we stopped to get some water. People are like, does anybody want the salt tablet? I'm showing around. I'm like, well, you should really only be taking them if you need them. If you don't need them, then,
Exactly. Don't just take anything.
That sort of stuff can cause cramping. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I'm trying to remember what you made a great point. One thing you can do as far as like liquid intake, especially as seasons change, you want to do this 3-4 times a year at the minimum. Personally, I'm kind of an obsessive, compulsive type of dude myself. So I do this before and after every single one of my long runs. Get your clothes off before you get dressed for your long run. Weigh yourself. Mm-hmm. Go out, do your drinking routine, your gelling routine, come back. The first thing you do, strip off all your clothes, weigh yourself again. Every pound that you are lighter equals about one of these. That means you've sweated out one of these for every pound that you are lighter. You will be utterly amazed at how much liquid you lose during a run. For me, in the summertime, I will lose 5 or 6 500 milliliter bottles worth of water just from sweat, because I'm a super duper heavy sweater. So do that, get to know your body, because things will change, especially from winter to summer. And that's the first thing you can absolutely get under control. And then once you know how much liquid you need, then you can start experimenting with how much potassium and salt you need to be
for sure.
Along the way.
Yeah, I never thought about that. That's a good way to do it. Yeah, instead of just throwing in the salt tablets because they're in fashion. Yeah.
Exactly. So let me see here. I just want to catch up on some of these chat messages before we move along. I'm fooling around with different gels and small races and long runs to see what works. I just tried the spring gel and I love them. Yeah, Spring Energy is good stuff. I tend to find that they are good for sort of more aerobic style runs where you just need some form of carbohydrate. But as much as it's not the cool thing to say, I find when I have to go out and run fast, I want a little bit more of those, dirty type of gels that have just got a ton of maltodextrin in them. I just need that to be able to run fast. But yeah, definitely something that you should be absolutely experimenting with throughout your training cycle is how much you need to drink, how much you need to fuel, and what types of fuel. You just
I
every
go
week should
the
be
other way
another
from you.
experiment.
When I'm training for a marathon, I tend to, if I'm running, this will come as a surprise to people. And again, this isn't hard and fast rule for anybody. This is just you need to figure out, you listen to your body. So for me, if I'm doing less than 20 miles, I don't even take water. I don't take gels. I just go. I just literally go, and I literally, I know 30 minutes down the road, I'm in fat burning mode, big time. If I'm doing over 20 miles, I'll stop at I usually take Morton's, so I'll have 1 or 2 Morton's and a bottle of water, or a colored water, like anything with sugar in it. I'm just like that with the Morton's, yeah. So I just find that's what works for me. If I just train in Martin training, just really train on empty up until around 20 miles, and once I go over 20 miles, I'll start to get the gels in and get myself, because I'll probably, when I'm leading into a marathon, I'll have 220 miles, 222 and 224-mile runs. So I've got 6 weeks of really getting the gels in. So that really helps me. But anything before that, and that's just, like I said, that's just what I find works for me. Somebody else might find.
Point. You bring up a great point, Neil, and that is, this will lead us into what I think will be a great set of topics to finish off this discussion. But as a lead into that, I think the early parts of a training cycle, especially when you're talking about training for these longer road races, my long runs have an occasional progression run where I'm trying to get faster as I go, or I will have an occasional run where a portion of that long run will be at your intended marathon or half marathon pace, just as a check-in to make sure that you're capable of achieving your goal. However, in the early parts of a training cycle, a lot of my runs, the long runs, are purposefully slower, easy runs where I'm just covering the distance, and that does a great job of building up your mitochondria in your muscles so that you can burn fuel more efficiently. It helps you to branch your blood vessels so that your muscles are able to get more fuel and more oxygen more efficiently. And it also helps you burn fat so that you become a leaner runner. So because you're moving more slowly, there's less demand for that glycogen. So you can get away with, as you were saying, Neil, fueling a little bit less often. But as the training cycle progresses and you start involving more strength runs, more speed runs, and just more high intensity in general, that's when you kind of want to already have an idea of what it takes to allow you to move faster and work harder, because otherwise you're going to fall flat. It'd be very discouraging for people if they don't already have some idea. But especially in those early runs, just like you, Neil, if I go out for like anything 18 miles or lower, I'll generally have 1, maybe 2 gels maximum, but I'll depend more on like the tailwind drinks where I'm just kind of getting a complex starch drink into my system that slowly converts into glycogen. And this way you don't get those sort of sugar spikes of, oh man, I'm so energetic right now. And then a mile later, you're wondering how you're going to keep going. So that's one thing. I don't get paid by Tailwind. I'm not associated with them in any way, but I love that stuff because ever since I discovered it, I do not have those up and down spikes in my energy levels anymore on those long runs. So with that, sir, I want to do a little bit of talking. We've probably got about 12-15 minutes left in this live stream. So let me encourage everybody who's watching right now. We do have several viewers watching. Please, if you've got any questions, now's the time to get them in so we get an opportunity to answer them. But Neil, let's do a little bit of talking about the smart way to build the training plan itself. And we don't have to be specific about talking about 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, because all good training plans have something in common. And generally speaking, that is, you don't want a training plan that's going to last you more than 3 or 4 months on the outside, because you'll burn out, you'll hurt yourself. And every training plan usually has stages to it. As we alluded to earlier, in the beginning, you're just kind of be base building. It's going to be Not a lot of speed work, not a lot of strength work. You're just trying to extend your ability to run further.
Yeah.
Then we're going to go into sort of a strength phase where we start to introduce a little bit of speed, things like fartleks and strides, a little bit of hill work. And then only at that point, when your muscles and your ligaments and your tendons and your physical structure are used to the extra demands of those shorter bursts of speed, can you go into full-on speed work where you're visiting the track, say, once a week, and building in even some tempo runs where you're challenging yourself. By the time you get to the end of that third stage, you could be doing 2 speed work sessions a week plus your long run. And at that point, your body is just kind of rock solid. You know what I mean? And then, of course, the final stage, which is so important, and so many people try to get away with not doing, is the taper, so that your body can rest, be primed and ready to go for race day. I am now going to shut this mouth of mine. And Neil, I want you to talk about any and all aspects of the way you structure your training cycles.
Okay. So before I go into that, I keep thinking about this. We were talking about it earlier. I wanted to make this point across because this is very important. And I see this every day in clinic. I see this as people come in and they have what we call fear avoidance. So they'll say something like, oh, I can't go to the track anymore to do my hard workouts because it causes my back pain. Or I can't do my tempo workouts because when I do my tempo workouts, my knee hurts. Or I can't do, and we know from science that this is evidence-based research that the biggest barrier to recovery is fear avoidance. So again, let's say I try and say I'm treating somebody with low back pain. They're saying, I can't bend down to pick up something because that will hurt my back. It's like, no, you need to bend down and do that. You need to go to the track to do your run. You need to keep going. You will, in the course of a training session for a year, if you're training for a couple of races throughout the year to culminate in a marathon, which I'm going to do next year, you will get pain. And pain is not a bad thing. Pain is an alarm system to tell you that you need to take action. And that might be that you need to sleep more, or that you need to drop your load more, or you need to bring up your intensity in your intensity runs, or you need to drop it. It depends on what it is. It's not a red light to say stop running. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to say when we're going through this. Okay, so how would I structure my, for me, I kind of think more global in terms of how I'm structuring something. So my main goal for next year is to do the Dublin Marathon, which is in October. Okay, so that's going to give me 10 or 11 months. But I'm not really thinking about that at the moment because I have a 5-mile race, I have a 10-mile, I have a half marathon. I have a 5-mile, a 10K, a 10-mile, half marathon. And then once I finish all those, I'll start marathon training proper. But this is what I was saying at the start. Depending on where you are at the moment and where you want to get to, depends on what you need to do. So I hear people saying all the time, I hear some coaches saying, if you want to train for a marathon, it's only a 14-week training is all you need. Well, it is all you need if you have a very good aerobic. If you're running for the last 3 or 4 years, yes, all you need is 14 weeks. If you've never run a marathon before and you're just going to go in 14 weeks, well, good luck to you. That's going to be a very difficult task. If you take a 5K runner who says that all of a sudden says, I want to sign up to a marathon this year, and you're going to tell them that all they need is 14 weeks training, that's going to be an Everest type task if you ask me. Whereas if you take somebody who's been running for 20 years and they say, I want to try, you could say, yeah, 14 weeks might get you there. But for me, so I'll start off the year. Like I said in my last video, I don't wait till the new year because I always find it's a bit cliched. Everybody's gone out on their New Year's resolutions trying to do all this stuff. So I kind of started already. And I find what works for me is I'm kind of doing a good bit of speed work at the moment. I'm doing some strides and I'm doing some hill reps. Now, these are only 10-second hill repeats. I might do 2 sets of 5 of 10 seconds. Do some strides. I'm doing a little bit of tempo runs. And for me, at the moment, I don't keep it scientific. I just say my tempo run speed is the speed I think I could run at maximum for an hour. But I'm only doing it for 20 minutes, right? So I'm going out for a 20-minute tempo run. And when I finish that tempo run, if you said to me, you've got to do it again, I would be able to do it again. Yeah?
Exactly.
So a tempo run is not running for 20 minutes and then you're empty, you're on your hands and knees after it. That's, that's not going to get you what you need. Okay. So I'm doing quite a bit of that and I will keep doing that. And when the new year starts, I will crank up my speed. I'll do stuff like 8 times 5 minutes and 5 times 8 minutes, working at kind of 5K pace. And then I'll get the 5-mile race done. And then once that 5 mile race done, I know I have some speed in the bank, so I can ease off my speed because I know I have my speed is kind of covered. The neuromuscular facilitation of running fast is there. And I'll go into like a half marathon training program. So I'll spend a couple of months really trying to build up my half marathons. So I'll be going into those tempo runs, stretching out that long run. I'll hit the half marathon. I'll try and PB that. And then once I finish the half marathon, I've about 4 months then. I know I'm in tip-top shape then. And then I have 4 months to build my strength and my structure and get my body ready to run the marathon.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's funny, Neil, because I just took on yesterday. I just secured a new client, and that is exactly the way we're going. His intention is to run his first sub-3 marathon, and he came to me and he's like, I won't give away names or anything, but he's currently capable of running a 3:19.
Okay.
And so the first thing I told him was, well, I typically like to train people for a marathon in either a 12-week cycle or an 18 to 20-week cycle. And I said, even with that, I think we're pushing your luck and putting you at too great a risk of injury if we go after even like an 18 to 20-week cycle straight up to try to get you 20 minutes faster. That's a lot to ask in 20 weeks. So just like you spoke about, the way we're going to approach it is we're going to try to get him to a 125 half marathon in March. Then we're going to do some base building over the summer. And then we're going into an 18-week marathon training specific, because he will already be cardiovascularly and muscularly in amazing shape to be able to take on the high demand that a 259 demands. It looks like Neil has frozen a little bit, so I'm just going to keep on talking here until there we are. Okay, you're back. So what you were talking about in describing your own training over the next year, Neil, I think is absolutely spot on. It's the way that I like to get people to very challenging marathon goals. We do have a question from Dan here, very much on this subject. Goal setting question. I've got a spring goal, but I'm thinking about next fall yet. Should I be? I think, Dan, absolutely. I think something that's sort of meta to a single training cycle is runners who know they're going to be running for years. People who've made it their lifestyle should always be thinking in terms of stacking their training cycles. Don't just think in, I'm going for it. The next 14 weeks of my life is everything. And if I fail at my goal, my world falls apart and I'll be crying in the corner. It's nice if you hit your goal. It's wonderful if you hit your goal on race day. However, the way you should be thinking of everything is, even if you don't hit your A goal on race day, your fitness has improved so much because of the work you've put in during that cycle. Finish your race. If it's a marathon, take a month where take a week where you're doing nothing, and then just slowly take 3 weeks where you're rebuilding your capabilities. This way you're not losing everything you had during the last training cycle. And you start stacking. You should be thinking before you even start this training cycle, Dan, about what you will then be capable of 6 months from now, what you'll be capable a year from now. And this way, as long as you can keep yourself injury-free, you're just going to keep getting fitter. And you'll be setting realistic goals where you're not going for broke every time you go out there to try to race. And you'll also find that there's no such thing as failure anymore. That fear just kind of dissipates, because you may not get them this time, but when you go out in 6 months and you take another crack at it, you'll probably do better than you ever thought you could, because you're just constantly getting fitter.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. In the last marathon, the marathon I did before the pandemic, the last marathon was actually the second last marathon. I went to Chester, and in that year of training, I made the classic mistake. I focused totally on the race. I focused on getting the sub 3 hour marathon. I got myself in fantastic shape. I did everything. I hit all the sessions. It was like textbook. If you looked at my Strava, it was metronome. Everything was spot on. But I didn't, as it turns out, I got tripped up in the race. I ended up in the St. John's ambulance for 20 minutes because I hurt my shoulder. But when I look back on it, I wasn't annoyed about the race. But what I was annoyed about in the year leading up to it, I didn't do any. I probably would have PB'd a 5K, 10K, half marathon, but I didn't because I didn't race them. I just focused on the sub 3 hour marathon.
Yeah.
And now I look back, I think, had I went for some of those races in that year, so for the question, I would say definitely have something for the spring. Really go for that. But then don't just focus on that one race, because you can go into a rabbit hole. And like you said, sometimes your goals don't go the way they want to go. We don't always achieve what we've set out to achieve. Sometimes it's out of our hands. For me, that time it was out of my hands, I think. But I came back, and then the pandemic struck, so that took another 2 years off. So, so I would say definitely have a few little things planned, even if it's not something specific. It might be just I'm thinking about this, and then when you finish that race, you might just jump onto that training program. But I would definitely be thinking about the spring, or the fall, if I was that guy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's always nice to know where you're going, because that informs what you're doing right now. Always be stacking. Always think in terms of you're always going to be fitter. You're always going to be fitter.
Yeah.
It just keeps on going year after year. I mean, here I am, Neil. You said you've been running for 20 years. I've been running since I was 42, so 11 years coming up fast on 12 years for me, and that's the way it's gone for me. I mean, there were, admittedly, especially the first 5 or 6 years of my running career, I was all about the next race is everything. I got to give it my all, and I would be crushed. And I was not even smart enough to run the shorter races to build up my capabilities towards the marathon. I ran a half marathon in September of 2014, and immediately decided I was going to run marathons. And then that's all I did for like 5 or 6 years. And I wondered why I was constantly so injury prone, and it's because I wasn't sort of building up my body's ability to deal with high intensity stuff from running 5Ks and 10Ks and half marathons. So be a well-rounded runner. Go after all of these things. There's huge benefit to doing exactly what Neil said. Run sort of that cycle. Try to PB at a 5K, then go 10K, half marathon, and marathon. You only get stronger from all of it. With that said, folks, we've been talking for an hour and 2 minutes here, and I live for this stuff, so I could go on forever. And I've so enjoyed Neil's company and his vast wealth of knowledge on all of these subjects that I hope we get to do this again. But I think we're going to call it here, folks. I want to say, first of all, that I really, truly appreciate all the comments, everybody who's joined us, and everybody who watches after the fact. Thank you so much for sticking with us. And most of all, of course, thank you, Neil, for being here. Before we get out of here, Neil, I want you to just tell everybody where they can find you online. I don't know if I've already linked to your Run Sensible YouTube channel below, but if I haven't, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to update the video description so that people can get to you easily. But before we do walk away for the day, please, Neil, talk all about your different social media outlets and what people will find when they get there.
Okay, so the main channel will be my YouTube channel, which is just Run Sensible. I do vlogs there on my running, and I also do education videos on strength and conditioning or running injuries. And then I have an Instagram account, which is Run Sensible, but that's kind of a bit about running, but I don't post it a whole lot. I'm not into it that much. And then I also have another Instagram account called Function First, and that's all just videos of how to alleviate back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, whatever. It's for clinical stuff. So if you're into just little videos, that's it. Function First. Apart from that, that's about it for me. I use Twitter, but Twitter is just usually for interaction with political views and current affairs. But yeah, apart from that, that's it. Yeah, and Strava, you can get me on Strava. Neil Rooney on Strava. It's a picture of me running. Yeah, apart from that, that's all. Thank you very much for having me, Paul. I really enjoyed it. I can't believe we've been talking for an hour and 5 minutes. It feels like 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, it really flies. And it's because, just listening to you has been just entertaining and informative. So thank you for being here, sir. I can't thank you enough. It was one of those things when I was watching you training for your last marathon cycle, I was like, oh man, I got to get Neil on here, because there's so much that he talks about that, somehow slips past, my usual talking points. So I really enjoyed this, and I know that everybody will get a lot of value out of this one. So with that, folks, thank you for being here. Again, Neil, thank you for being here. We're going to sign off.
Cheers.
We've got other things to do with the rest of our day. So we'll free everybody up to get on with their runs. Have a good one, everybody.
Cool. Take care, Paul. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.